So we're here this afternoon with members of our Lived Experience Advisory Group who are part of the Violence, Abuse and Mental Health Network project. And we're thinking about measurement. So measurement of violence, of abuse and of mental health and what that can contribute to the aims to reduce and eliminate violence, abuse and mental health. So if we just start with Lisa. Lisa, can you briefly introduce us to the Lived Experience Advisory Group?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Lived Experience Advisory Group was set up nearly 3 years ago now to support the work of the Violence, Abuse and Mental Health Network more broadly. So it is a group of individuals, all of whom, including myself, have lived experience of violence, abuse and mental ill health. And the group is very much there to help shape, inform, question, feedback, all of the work that goes across the network. So it's been involved in some of the grant applications that have come in, has helped deliver some of the webinars, has written blogs, etc. And really with this aim of linking up academic knowledge and research with the voices of those who have lived experience.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Lisa. So we've got Lisa and we've got Winnie, who's one of our league members. So if I ask you first, Winnie, and then Lisa, anything else that you want to add? What do you think are the current challenges for the measurement of violence, abuse and mental health? And how does lived experience help identify or frame those challenges?
Thanks, Jude. I guess for me, I've only found out through therapy that, because I have autism, that I didn't know what I was suffering from. So, for example, things like gaslighting, stonewalling. I needed a therapist to tell me and label it for me. I just know that they didn't feel very well. It didn't feel good. And that I was hurt, but I don't know what it was. And I guess for measurements, how would you measure that if someone doesn't even know they've experienced it? So, I mean, I was just, the other day, I was just doing some kind of help work with hate crime. And, it's like the definition of hate crime. If someone said to me, have you ever experienced hate crime? I would say no. But if someone had unpacked it for me and I told them my experience, yes, it would be hate crime. So I'm kind of thinking about what trauma is for me. And it really needed a lot of unpacking before I could say, yes, I'm a victim and I need help. I don't know whether these measurements would capture those people. And like myself, and also people with other disabilities like learning disabilities, or people who can't process kind of that emotional side or be able to name it. I think that would be something of a challenge.
Yeah, I guess there's so many different avenues and angles to it, isn't there? As Winnie, really rightly says, we can't measure stuff unless people know that they meet and hit the definition of something. I think measurement is often quite limited to the places and spaces that we might be asking the questions. So we know we can take measurements from police data, but that will only give us reported experiences. We can take data from mental health services, but that will only take people who are actually in access of particular services. And then, there are questions around kind of how we set the definitions or categories that we want to measure in the first place. So I'm always really minded of the piece of work that Hannah Bowles did on older victims of sexual violence, and actually unearthing the fact that we only really measured age up until 65, and then it was 65 plus, and everybody over 65 got lumped in this, what became a really broad category because people are living so much longer. I think we also know that measurement doesn't necessarily allow us to connect two pieces up. So we might know that there are X number of people who've experienced a particular form of violence or abuse and X number of people that are perpetrating it. But what's the link or the overlap between those two people? And of course, you know, measuring prevalence doesn't tell us anything about impact. So the impact for one individual of experiencing a particular time gripe might be really different to experiencing a very different, experiencing the same time gripe, but for a very different person. So, you know, it's thinking about, what are we measuring? Are we measuring prevalence? Are we measuring outcomes? Are we measuring impacts? And if so, how do we do that in a way that really makes sense to somebody with lived experience? And so I suppose it's all of those kind of questions and challenges that people with lived experience can come in and say, okay, great, but what about this, or what about that? Or actually, you know, if you ask me this question, you wouldn't get the right response from me because it doesn't make sense in terms of my understanding or my knowledge.
Yeah, thank you both. Some really big challenges there, and some very kind of pertinent places to start thinking about how to improve that measurement, which I think brings us on to the next question, which is, what do you think are the current opportunities to improve measurement of violence, abuse and mental health? Are there opportunities to improve it? We've heard some kind of ideas around how they might be improved. So are there actually opportunities to contribute to those improvements? What are your thoughts on that, Winnie, to start with?
What I was thinking about the current opportunities is, I think with the network, it's encouraging training and education, and I think that's really important. For me, it's given me an opportunity to participate in something that I will not do without the help of Lisa, the facilitators, and Charlie and Julie, and they've really helped me to bring my voice out. I've been able to help with, you know, kind of helping to mark the grant application, which is completely, it's not something that I would do or ever have the privilege to do. I've always been applying for something and never getting it. So seeing from a lived experience point of view, the benefit it would bring to the network and to the community was something new to me. And I think it really helped with having a really good facilitator. I think sometimes there wasn't, like, we don't always have to have an outcome. It was good to have that connection and to talk and to be our genuine selves without having to, well, by the end of this session we would have done that and that, and Lisa really helped us kind of bring us back to focus, but in a very genuine and a kind way. And sometimes we didn't accomplish something, but Lisa was, you know, qualified enough, or is, to kind of fill in the gaps, which I thought was very, very helpful, because otherwise we might not have been able to meet all of the aims of the network.
Thanks, Winnie. Yeah, I guess there's something for me about those opportunities to actually lead and drive the research based on what people with lived experience think the gaps are, rather than what people without lived experience might think the gaps are. You know, I think it's really easy that we can all sit and think, oh, there's no evidence about X, Y, or Z, and therefore we should go out and find it. But actually, if that's not meaningful to the people who will have lived experience, if that's not going to inform or shape or influence the services or support they might get or the outcomes, why are we measuring it? Like, it's almost research for the sake of doing research. So I think there's something about turning the process, changing the kind of way in which we do stuff, and rather than bringing people in with lived experience at the last minute, bringing them in really early on. I think there's real opportunities for them to be able to act as critical friends, as spaces of insight and knowledge. You know, none of us know what we don't know until someone tells us something, you know. And I certainly, and say it a lot, I feel like when I'm working with members of the League, I learn so much every single time, because I'm always being put in the place of having to see it from a new perspective and say, oh, okay, yeah, you know, I hadn't necessarily understood how, you know, somebody might not understand X, Y, or Z, you know. So I think that's really important. I think, you know, there's also something in terms of opportunities, but also challenges about how we do kind of code stuff and how we broadly link it together so that we can get bigger data sets, but how we also don't miss nuance within that. So I know, you know, certainly if we think about hate crime that Winnie was talking about, you know, there's been a lot of debate about whether or not we make misogyny a hate crime. And on one hand, you could say, great, you know, if we start coding it as an actual crime, we can measure it better and we can get a better sense of understanding and we can get better outcomes for victim survivors because we're criminalizing something. But actually, the risk is that you then end up, you know, just saying hate crime happens to 50% of the population, say, but actually, is that hate crime based on gender? Is that hate crime based on race? Is that hate crime based on sexuality? And if we just conflate everything in one place, we then again can't necessarily create the best possible outcomes for people. And so again, I think, you know, that lived experience lens helps you kind of start to unpack some of those things, you know, and just act as a space for a sounding board. You know, does this question make sense? Is this the right track? Is this something we should be looking at?
Yes, yeah, thanks both. That's really helpful. So there's something I think there around the facilitation of being able to get those contributions, and something around, well, what are those contributions for? Like, what is the point? And kind of taking you back to that idea of what do we need to know and why do we need to know it? And what are we going to do with it once we've got it? And kind of trying to tie all those things together. Yeah, okay, really insightful. Thank you. Have either of you got any final reflections around kind of measurement and the use of measurement that you'd like to raise at this point? Anything from you, Winnie?
I think more needs to be done to reach out to people who are not, I don't know if it's neurotypical or neuroatypical, I can't remember which one it is, but and the hard to reach groups, because in a way your measurements won't be accurate, the research wouldn't be accurate if you don't capture those individuals. And of course, the mental health system is so disjointed and is so inconsistent. I do think that more needs to be done about, you know, complex trauma and how, I guess, people are getting a lot of misdiagnosis and the impact of stigma, which means that those people would not be captured in the measurements because they've been branched off to another area. I really hope that the work of VAM continues for, you know, people like myself, and actually for just to help everyone, I guess, because that it's such a big issue at the moment, and there's now more awareness, but it's not enough. Yeah.
Thanks, Winnie. Anything else to contribute, Lisa?
Always something else to contribute, Jude. I think for me it's something about how we support and encourage and nurture organizations actually to really start capturing really robust data sets and also be more willing to share those data sets, you know. So I think, you know, there are spaces and places that we're capturing data, but we're not always getting it in a format that means it's easy to pull out. We don't necessarily know where duplication is, and I think there's that, you know, real need to think about how we can assess data from different sources. So whether it's criminal justice or health or third sector organizations, and kind of examine what's going on from it actually, and sort of say, okay, you know, this particular group or demographic of people seem to be reporting to the police, and this particular group of people seem to be using health services, and this particular group of people seem to be absent from all of the data sets. Because it's only really when we can start to kind of unify and bring those together that we're going to get to a place where we're actually using data, you know, for better outcomes for people with lived experience. And for me, there's very little point in researching something unless it's got a real world application at some point down the line. Thank you.
And many thanks to you both, Winnie and Lisa, for taking time out to consider and reflect on and share with us some of those kind of really interesting insights via the Lived Experience Advisory Group for VAM around our measurement theme. Thank you.